talking about factoring last time. Remember what it means to factor something? When you factor an expression, remember what the definition is? Definitions are really important, and as we continue through the course and you learn more material, how do you keep from getting confused? How do you keep it straight? How do you remember what you learned 6 weeks ago? And it does help to know the definitions and why things work. And it's also important to, of course, do all the homework and not fall behind. But also it's important, like I was saying before, to reflect on the material. Ask yourself questions about the material. All right, so let's look at these two. These aren't too hard. There's a pattern I want you to look at here. When you simplify this is 2 times the quantity of 3 plus 5. You'd use the order of operations, right? 3 plus 5 is 8. 2 times 8 is 16. Whereas this says this 2 is multiplying each of them. You see the 2 multiplies the 3 and the 2 multiplies the 5. And if you do it that way, you get 6 plus 10, which is also 16. And it turns out that's a very important property. It's called the distributive law. It says this: when a number multiplies a sum, it multiplies each of the numbers inside. See, if there's an a that's multiplying a sum, it gives you the same answer as if you multiply a times each of them. This a distributes to each term inside the parentheses. Now, one good question would be, why do you need to do that? Why don't you just always follow the order of operations? That's a really good question. If that's what you were thinking, then that shows me that you really understand what you've been learning. Yeah, but there might be times when you might not be able to combine these. I'll show you in just a second. But in terms of the distributive law, this is called product form because it's written as a multiplication problem, and this is called additive form, okay? Because it's written as the sum of 2 terms. The product form is the product of 2 factors. A and the quantity B plus C are the 2 factors. The right side is the sum of 2 terms. You know what the terms are? AB is a term and AC is a term. It's really important that you understand when something's written in additive form and when something's written in product form. It is crucial. But like I was saying, it says use the distributive law to multiply. You would have to use the distributive law to multiply because if you wanted to simplify this, you can't combine the y and the 5. They're not like terms, right? So the only way you could multiply this out is with the distributive law, which says if a number is multiplying a sum, it has to multiply each of them. Sometimes it's kind of helpful to draw little arrows like this, at least in your mind. The number on the outside has to multiply each term on the inside. That's what the law says. So what is 4 times y? It's just 4y. What is 4 times 5? 20. So that's what the distributive law says. The number on the outside has to multiply each. The common mistake, of course, is for the number on the outside to just multiply one of them, and then it's wrong. It has to multiply both. Otherwise, it violates the distributive law. Okay, how about this? This number on the outside is -2. It's multiplying 3 terms. What do you think we should do there? How many terms should the -2 multiply if you wanted to multiply it out? The answer is it has to multiply each of them. It has to distribute to each of them. Okay? So what's -2 times 3x? -6x. What's -2 times -5y? Positive 10y. What's -2 times 4? -8. So there's your answer. What if the number on the outside is on the right side instead of the left? The distributive law says if you have a number on the left, it's multiplying a sum and has to multiply each term. What if it's on the right? What do you think we should do there? Well, one thing you could do is move it in front. If you really want to move it, if you move it to the left, you could because of the commutative law, or it would be okay just to multiply it through at that point also. But you could move it to the left if you wanted to. You should end up with -12w plus 15. This is kind of sneaky. What do you think we should do here? This is negative parentheses. What does that mean, negative parentheses? Is there an operation there or something? What does the negative sign mean when it's in front of something? The negative in front of parentheses means you're multiplying by -1. If you want to put a little 1 in there, that's okay. This is -1 times this sum. So the -1 has to distribute. You see why that's true? If you have -3, doesn't it mean -1 times 3, right? We've seen that a lot. So when you see a negative of anything, it's negative 1 times that anything. Negative of this quantity is negative 1 times the quantity. So when you multiply it out, negative 1 times 4x is negative 4x, negative 1 times negative 2y is positive 2y, negative 1 times negative 3 is positive 3. Okay, so the distributive law says that there are times when you can violate the order of operations. If a number is multiplying a sum, as long as it multiplies each of them. Now, we're going to multiply this negative 2 times each of them, but do you see that there's like terms in here? So it's not essential, but it's a good idea. Always combine things whenever possible, even though it doesn't say to combine things. I would suggest you do that. Now, the other way to do it would work too. If you didn't combine them and you multiply the negative 2 times each of them and then combine them at the end, that'd be okay too. But this is a good strategy. Always look to combine like terms. Negative 3m plus 8m is 5m. Negative 2 has to multiply each of them. The negative 2 multiplies the 5m. You get negative 10. You get negative 10m. But what's negative 2 times 5? Negative 10. So negative 10m plus negative 10. Can I combine those? No, not like terms, right? A couple more and I'll give you some to try. How about that? Here we have 3ab times this quantity. The 3ab has to multiply each of them. So you get, let's see, negative 3ab times 4x. I get negative 12abx plus 15aby when this multiplies this, plus 6ab. Negative 3ab times negative 2 is 6ab. Okay, why don't you hit the pause button and try these. The instructions would be to multiply using the distributive law, okay? Okay, here we go. On this first one, remember, the 4 has to multiply each of them. Don't forget to multiply both terms inside by the 4. I get 12p plus negative 8. On this one, don't forget the negative 5 has to multiply each of them. So negative 5 times 2x is negative 10x. Negative 5 times negative y is positive 5y. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. If the negative 3 on this next one is on the right, if you want to move it over to the left, you can. Otherwise, just multiply each of them by negative 3. What's negative 5w times negative 3? Positive 15w. What's 2 times negative 3? Plus negative 6. Can I combine these? Not like terms. As we just talked about, a negative in front of parentheses, there's that means negative 1 times. That's just a notation. A negative in front of an expression means negative 1 times. So when you multiply each of these by negative 1, do you see what happens here, folks? It changes the sign. This becomes a negative 5x, this becomes a 6y, this becomes a positive 1. Here you're multiplying the negative 5 times this quantity. Like I told you, I like to combine the like terms first. You don't have to, but I think it's a good habit. 6z plus negative 8z is negative 2z. And then you have plus 5. Now I'm going to use the distributive law. Negative 5 times negative 2z is 10z. Negative 5 times 5 is negative 25. You can't combine them. Leave it like that. Last one. I got negative 6ax plus 4bxy plus negative 10xy. Okay, one more thing here. Talking about the distributive law. Very important law. We're going to use this a lot in this class. Pretty much the rest of the quarter, just about. So, and next quarter as well. Make sure you understand what it says, what it's telling you. This is called product form, this is called additive form. The number on the outside multiplies each of them. Some of the homework problems, I know some students have trouble with these kinds of problems. They're using these open sentences and making them true closed sentences, but all they're really doing, all they really want you to do here is try to look at the distributive law and recognize the pattern. You see this 3 that's in front of these parentheses? This is the left side of the distributive law. 3 is like A. And you don't know what this is, but look, the 3 has to multiply this, or the A has to multiply B to give you this first term here. Well, this first term is 12x. That means that this times this has to be 12x. So what do you multiply 3 by to get 12x? This has to be 4x. You see? And this last term here, A times C, is the product of this number times this number. So what is this times this? What does this last number have to be? 15. So my advice is, don't make too much out of these open sentences. Just forget about the open sentences and just think about what the distributive law says. The distributive law says if you have 8 times this quantity 2y plus negative 2, the 8 has to multiply the 2y. So what is it that multiplies 2y? It's the 8. And the 8 has to multiply the negative 2. So what has to multiply negative 2? The 8. So, like I said, don't make it harder than it is. This is the distributive law, but now we've written it backwards. This is the product form side. This is the additive form side. But still, this times this has to be this. This times this has to be 2x. So what does this have to be? It has to be x. The 2 times this has to be 6y. Well, what do you multiply 2 by to get 6y? The answer is 3y. Very good. Okay, why don't you hit the pause button and try these on your own. Use the distributive law to make these open sentences into true closed sentences. Okay, in this first one, remember 4 times 3x, when you multiply it out, it has to equal something times 3x. This has to be a 4. 4 times 5 has to be this one. Some of you just might write it as 20, but they don't want you to do that. They just want you to leave it as 4 times 5. Okay. Here, the distributive law says this 4 has to multiply each of them, so 4 times x has to equal 4 times something. That makes this an x. 4 times 7 has to equal 4 times 7 something. This has to be a 7. That's what the distributive law says. These last two are a little trickier. This is the additive form side. This is the product form side. So something times x has to equal 2x. So what does this number on the outside have to be? 2. That's right. And furthermore, 10 has to be this times this. It's kind of like a puzzle, isn't it? 2 times what equals 10? This has to be 5. Of course, if you wanted to, you could always multiply it back through to check. Okay, last one. 3 times this number has to equal this, 9x, so this would have to be a 3x, wouldn't it? 3 times this thing has to be 12, so what has to be this last quantity? 4? That's working. That's it. And you can multiply it back through to check yourself. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.